Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be playing around with a drugstore palette. I recently got my hands on the Model's Own Barely There 2 palette. I've been dying to try it out. I typically don't really delve into the drugstore eyeshadow kind of realm. I do own some more affordable eyeshadows such as Morphe and like Colourpop, but when I go into Priceline, I never really gravitate towards any of the eyeshadows there. Nothing really ever grabs me, like Maybelline, L'Oreal, like nothing ever really is like, ooh, I need that when it's in like a palette form. But this one did catch my eye. It's a warm tone neutral palette, which is right up my alley. So I wanted to give it a go for you guys and see if it's kind of comparable to some of my other eyeshadow palettes. So this is the look that I created today. I'm going to be showing you swatches, the demo obviously, and I also give you kind of my thoughts and opinions at the end, whether or not I think this is worth the money or if I'd recommend it to you. So if you're interested in hearing more about the Model's Own Barely There Volume 2, then just keep watching. So this is what the box looks like when you get it. I'm going to turn down my lights a little bit so you can kind of see. It's a really beautiful kind of light tan blush tone, just says Barely There, and then the detailing around the sides here kind of looks like waves in a way, like whitewash waves. It's really pretty. On the back it just has the names of the shades and also a little description, but that is the outer packaging. This is what the palette looks like. Just comes in the normal kind of Model's Own packaging. It feels really sturdy and secure. It feels like light, but it's also got a little bit of weight to it, so you don't feel like it's super flimsy. I love that it's not see-through. I hate it when the drugstore palettes have that kind of like see-through plastic so you can see the shades. I feel like it just looks really tacky, so I like this is all enclosed, and then just on the back are the names of the shades. Now what I do really love about the packaging as well is that it has a magnetic closure. You know that this isn't going to pop open and damage your shadows or anything like that, so I really do dig the Model's Own packaging. I think they get it spot on, and for a drugstore price that is so good. Now speaking of price, I picked mine up from Priceline. They did have a 40% off sale, so I think I got it for roughly like $14. Normally this guy retails for about $27. I'll leave everything linked down below if you wanted to check it out, but I'm pretty sure it's up near like the $30 mark. So it's not terrible, but it's not like a super cheap palette by any means, but that is the price if you're interested. So when you open the palette up, this is what it looks like. You get a huge mirror, and it's actually a really good quality mirror. You're not warped or like looking weird or anything like that, so it's a great mirror. And then these are what the shades look like. As you can see, they're all really warm toned. We have 10 shades here, 5 matte and 5 shimmer, so it's a good amount of mattes and shimmer ratio in my opinion. Normally when it comes to the drugstore, you get a palette and it's just full of shimmers, which makes it really hard to create any definition and depth to your look. So now I'm going to jump right into the swatches portion of this video so we can see what the shadows actually look like. Do keep in mind though that swatches are not a true representation of what shadows look like on the eye. Sometimes they look really pigmented and they perform really badly on the eye, and the same can be said in the opposite. So sometimes they'll swatch really horribly, but they'll build really beautifully on the eye. So let's just jump right into the swatches.
So first up we have the shade Basic, and Basic is a champagne-y shimmer. It is absolutely stunning. I can see this one as an inner corner highlight or an all over lid shade. Super pretty. The next shade we have is Interlude, and this is a great transition shade. It's swatched actually really quite well. It is a kind of on the blush side of the spectrum rather than being like a reddy kind of brown, and I think it'll complement a lot of the lighter shades for a really natural everyday transition shade. The next shade we have is Playtime, and this is a beautiful shade. It veers a little bit more on the kind of pinky shimmer champagne-y side, has that beautiful pink reflect to it, and so pretty. The next shade we have is Slip, and that's the second kind of transition shade. Now this one definitely veers on that kind of warm reddy side of the spectrum, whereas Interlude, like I said, was on that blush spectrum. Slip is definitely onto that kind of orangey earthy warm tone. Again, another beautiful transition shade. Now the last shade that we have on the first row is the shade Expose, and it is another shimmer shadow. This is a kind of taupey bronzy shade. It reminds me a little bit of a lighter, slightly more bronzed version of Satin Taupe. Now the first shade we have on the bottom row is a matte. It's called Low Key, and this is a deepening up shade. It's slightly more cooler toned, I would say, than Slip, and a little bit darker in tone as well. The next shade we have across is Suede. It's another shimmer shadow, and it is a really beautiful deep bronze shade. Following that we have the shade Timid. Now Timid is the darkest shade in the palette and is also matte as well, so you can use this shade to deepen up the look. The next shade we have across is called Drape, and this is a kind of cranberry rich warm brown. I definitely wouldn't say it's like a true cranberry. It definitely has a lot more of that kind of chocolate brown warmth to it, but it does have that hint of red into it. It brings out this kind of fiery shade, which is beautiful. And then last shade we have is is the shade Undone. Now, Undone is a chocolate kind of brown, not as deep as Timid, but slightly more rich in comparison to Low Key and maybe a slight bit warmer and darker. So that is all the shades there, guys. They swatch actually surprisingly well. I'm pretty impressed with them. I could have gone with a little bit more oomph with the shimmers, but for a drugstore palette, it's not too bad.
So as you can see from the swatches, they're not swatching terribly. The shimmers are probably a little bit lackluster for me. When I apply a shimmer, I want it to be like foiled, metallic, like the Makeup Geeks foiled eyeshadows. The mattes I felt actually swatched quite well for a drugstore shadow. Some swatches of mattes that I've done from high-end palettes don't come up as pigmented, but let's just jump right into the demo so we can see how they actually performed on the eyes, and then I'll give you my final thoughts.
So guys, for this look, I'm starting off with the shade Interlude, and I'm just using this on a large blending brush. It's really fluffy. It's able to disperse the product really far out and throughout my crease and blending it right up towards my eyebrow as well. The shade blends out so seamlessly. It's such a beautiful kind of romantic transition shade. I'm absolutely loving it. Then I'm going to be taking the shade Low Key to further deepen up the kind of crease area. I'm using this on a slightly more tapered blending brush and really focusing it within the crease and towards the outer corners of my eyes as well. So just building up the intensity until I'm happy with how deep it's gotten, and then going back in with that initial blending brush just to blend out all the edges and make sure everything's blending in nice and seamlessly. Next up, we're going in with the shade Timid, and as you can see, I got quite a lot of kickback in the pan, but when I actually go to apply the shade onto my outer corner, it literally disappears. I don't know what is going on with this shade, but I really had to go in quite a few times and really pack the shade into my outer V and blend it out ever so slightly, because literally the pigment just disappeared. I feel like this shade made the look a little bit patchy because it just wouldn't blend out the way that I wanted to. Next up, I'm taking my MAC Pro Longwear Concealer and I'm going to cut my crease. You guys have seen me do this a million times, but I'm just cutting my crease to make sure I get that really nice oval appearance to my eyelid. I love doing cut creases. I think it's just such a flattering technique on my eye shape. I think it just really opens up my eyes. I'm not taking it all the way to the edge, just kind of more of a half cut crease today. Then once I got the shape that I want, I'm just going to pat over the concealer with my finger to kind of take away any of that excess concealer and also blend out the edges just to make sure there's not such a harsh line between the eyeshadow and concealer. For our lid, we're going in with the shade Playtime, and we're just going to be packing that all over my lid, just using a flat kind of packing brush. I did find that this didn't really apply that great with a brush, so I ended up just using my finger to apply it, and that was so much better. Then I'm just taking that same shade that we use, Low Key, just to blend out the edges a little bit further. Then I felt like the blend just wasn't that seamless, so I'm actually going to go in with the shade Exposed, and I'm just going to pat that in between where the kind of outer corner and Playtime kind of meet, just to create a little bit more of a seamless ombre blend. Then I did go in with a little bit more Timid just to go in and deepen up that outer corner a little bit more. I didn't really blend it out too much though, because the pigment just disappears. Then we're going to move on to the lower lash line, and I'm just using the shade Interlude and just blending that all along the lower lash line. Then we're dipping back into Low Key just to further deepen up the outer corner, just with a more tapered pencil brush. Then to open up my eyes, I'm just taking my Rimmel Exaggerate waterproof pencil in Nude, and I'm just running that along my lower waterline. And then I'm going to take this bronze pencil and I'm just going to run that along my upper lash line, and also I'm going to tightline with it as well. Moving on to mascara, I'm just applying this to my top and bottom lashes before I go and apply my falsies. The falsies that I'm using today are the Vixen Lashes by Socialize. They're so beautiful. If you're after a natural glam lash, they're my absolute favorite. Love them. I'm going to move on to contouring and taking my Park Avenue Princess bronzer, and I'm just going to contour my face using that to add a little bit more warmth and definition to my face. Just applying that underneath my cheekbones, along the tops of my forehead, and then also under my chin. Then for blush, I'm taking the shade Nymphaea from Sigma. It is a beautiful everyday blush. It looks really scary in the pan when you get it. It's really like pink based and bright, but it looks beautiful on the cheeks. Then for highlight, I'm taking the shade Kitty Cat from the Anastasia Nicole Guerrero Glow Kit, and I'm just applying that to the tops of my cheekbones, my Cupid's bow, down the bridge of my nose, my inner corners, and also my brow bone to highlight my face. Then we're moving on to lips, and I'm taking the shade Strip from Anastasia Beverly Hills, and I'm just applying that obviously all over my lips. And then, because you guys know I'm always using a gloss, the gloss I'm using is Love Bug from Rimmel, and I'm just applying that right over the top, more focused in the center of my lips to kind of just give it a more juicy kind of pout appearance. And then guys, that is the finished look.
My kind of final thoughts on this palette is that it is a good beginner's palette. If you're not a fan of those really intense foiled eyeshadows and you're after something a little bit more subtle, then this is a good palette to go for. The shimmers still stand up and they look beautiful on the lid, as you can see. They just don't add that like really big punch, is what I'm after. But I do know there are some people who don't want that bright, intense eyeshadow on their lid. They're after something a little bit more subtle and everyday appropriate. So keeping that in mind, I think the shimmers are okay. They're not the best, but for a drugstore palette that markets itself as being a barely there palette, I don't think I can complain. I mean, from the name, I wasn't kind of going in thinking that these shimmers were going to be like metallic foiled eyeshadows by any means, so I can't really complain. Now moving on to the kind of the transition shades, I thought the transition shades I used were great. Now for me, I absolutely love the transition shade. Interlude and Low Key were beautiful transition shades. They really created a nice kind of definition within the lid. I loved how they applied just as well as any kind of high-end shadow. I did need to build them up a little bit, but I'm not opposed to that. I don't mind a shadow that I have to kind of build up within the crease. I prefer that than something that's way too pigmented and then I like screw it up and it's so hard to blend out. So I didn't mind those ones. But this deepening out shade here, Timid, it's just not that great. It swatched quite well on my arm and I was really excited about it, but applying it into the outer V of my eyelid, it just had no pigment. So I placed it down and as soon as I go to blend it out, it just kind of disappeared and kind of muddied up the look. You can definitely see that it is darker on the kind of outer V, but it's just not that kind of depth and dimension that I wanted. So I was a bit disappointed with that shade. So that is kind of my thoughts on this palette. Now, do I think that you guys need to rush out and buy it? No, I have my Anastasia Beverly Hills eyeshadows and also my Jaclyn Hill palette, which I can get very similar colors and looks from. So, I mean, if you already have a bunch of eyeshadow palettes like the ones I mentioned, you don't need to be going out and buying this one. Is it a good drugstore palette for beginners if you're after something that's really natural, everyday and wearable? It is a good palette if you're just starting out and wanting to add something to your collection. If you wanted to pair this up with a few like glitters, or if you have a really nice pigmented black that you like, just to add a little bit more depth and definition, I think the combination of black and a glitter would really kind of complement this palette. For myself though, as I own a lot of palettes, it's nothing that I'm like, wow, this is such a good palette and it's comparable to palettes that I already own. I feel like it's something that I'm really not going to be reaching for. So I will probably be passing this on to a friend or family member so they can get a little bit more use out of it. I just probably won't be reaching for it again, I'm afraid. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. If you did, don't forget to leave me a big like, thumbs up, subscribe down below if you haven't already so don't miss out on any of my new videos. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. I'll see you all in my next video. Mwah. Bye guys.